What a caveman did when his partner cheated. Imagine discovering that your partner has been intimate with another member of. Now imagine that there are no laws, no police, no social services to intervene. Your survival depends on group cooperation, but your trust has been shattered. This was the brutal reality for prehistoric humans when infidelity occurred, and the archaeological evidence reveals that their responses were far more complex, violent, and strategic than we might expect. If you're curious about how our ancestors handled betrayal and relationship conflicts in a world without rules, smash that subscribe button right now. We're just starting this channel, and we need your support to grow. Also, drop a comment telling us the city you're watching from. We love to see how far these stories travel. The archaeological evidence for prehistoric relationship conflicts is written in bones, cave paintings, and burial sites across the world. When researchers analyze skeletal remains from prehistoric sites, they find patterns of violence that suggest intense personal conflicts, many of which appear to be related to sexual competition and relationship disputes. The responses to infidelity in prehistoric times weren't just emotional. They were matters of survival that could determine who lived and who died. The first thing to understand is that prehistoric relationships weren't based on modern concepts of love or monogamy. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric humans practiced various forms of pair bonding, but these relationships were primarily survival partnerships. When infidelity occurred, it wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a threat to the entire survival structure of the group. The resources, protection, and cooperation that came from pair bonding were essential for survival, and infidelity could destroy these vital relationships. The most common response to infidelity in prehistoric times was immediate physical violence. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric humans were capable of extreme brutality when they felt betrayed. Skeletal remains from prehistoric sites often show evidence of violent trauma that appears to be the result of personal conflicts rather than warfare or hunting accidents. Broken bones, skull fractures, and other injuries found in prehistoric remains often show patterns consistent with interpersonal violence between individuals who knew each other well. But the violence wasn't random or uncontrolled. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric humans had sophisticated understanding of how to use violence strategically. When a prehistoric human discovered their partner's infidelity, they would often target specific individuals in calculated ways designed to maximize the impact on them. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about re-establishing dominance and control over the social structure. The most shocking evidence comes from prehistoric sites that show clear signs of what archaeologists call punishment violence. These sites contain skeletal remains that show evidence of deliberate, systematic injuries that were designed to cause maximum pain and suffering without immediately killing the victim. Broken fingers, damaged joints, and other injuries suggest that prehistoric humans used torture as a response to infidelity, creating long-lasting consequences for those who violate relationship agreements. The social dynamics of prehistoric infidelity were incredibly complex. Archaeological evidence suggests that when infidelity occurred, it created ripple effects throughout the entire group. The betrayed partner would often seek allies among other group members, creating factions that could tear the group apart. These conflicts weren't just between the individuals involved, they became group-wide disputes that could lead to violence, exile, or even the dissolution of the entire group. The role of group leadership in managing infidelity conflicts was crucial. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric groups had informal leadership structures, and these leaders would often intervene in relationship disputes to prevent them from destroying the group. However, these interventions weren't always peaceful. Sometimes the group leader would side with one party and help them eliminate the other, recognizing that the survival of the group was more important than individual justice. The most disturbing evidence comes from prehistoric burial sites that show signs of what archaeologists call relationship violence. These sites contain paired burials where one individual shows evidence of violent death, while the other shows no signs of trauma. The positioning in grave goods suggests that these might be cases where a betrayed partner killed their unfaithful mate and then was buried with them, possibly as a form of prehistoric murder-suicide. The responses to infidelity weren't always immediate or violent. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric humans also used more subtle forms of retaliation. They would withhold resources, exclude the unfaithful partner from group activity, or sabotage their survival efforts. These non-violent responses could be just as deadly as physical violence, as they could lead to starvation, exposure, or death from lack of group protection. The gender dynamics of prehistoric infidelity responses were complex and often deadly. Archaeological evidence suggests that male and female responses to infidelity were different, reflecting the different survival strategies of each sex. When males discovered their partner's infidelity, they were more likely to respond with immediate physical violence against both the partner and the rival. When females discovered their partner's infidelity, they were more likely to use social manipulation and resource control to retaliate. The most shocking evidence comes from prehistoric sites that show signs of what archaeologists call jealousy killing. These sites contain skeletal remains that show evidence of extreme violence directed at specific body parts, particularly the face and genital. This type of violence suggests that prehistoric humans were capable of the same intense jealousy and rage that modern humans experience, but without the social constraints that limit our responses. The involvement of children in prehistoric infidelity conflicts was particularly brutal. Archaeological evidence suggests that when relationships broke down due to infidelity, the children often became targets of violence. Skeletal remains of children from prehistoric sites sometimes show evidence of trauma that suggests they were killed or abandoned when their parents' relationships collapsed. This wasn't just cruelty, it was often a survival strategy, as caring for another person's children could be a deadly resource. The territorial aspects of prehistoric infidelity responses were equally. Archaeological evidence shows that when infidelity occurred, it often led to territorial disputes that could result in exile or death. The betrayed partner would sometimes force their unfaithful mate to leave the group's territory, knowing that survival alone in the wilderness was nearly impossible. This was essentially a death sentence disguised as banishment. The most remarkable evidence comes from prehistoric sites that show signs of what archaeologists call revenge networks. These sites contain evidence of violence that appears to be the result of extended conflicts between groups, often triggered by infidelity disputes. When a prehistoric human was wronged by a member of another group, they would sometimes organize raids or attacks designed to get revenge. These conflicts could last for generations, with groups carrying out cyclical violence against each other. The psychological impact of infidelity on prehistoric humans was intense and long-lasting. Archaeological evidence suggests that betrayed individuals often became social outcasts, unable to form new relationships or maintain their position within the group. Some skeletal remains show evidence of self-inflicted injury, suggesting that prehistoric humans were capable of the same self-destructive behaviors that modern humans exhibit when dealing with relationship trauma. The development of prehistoric justice system was often driven by the need to manage infidelity conflict. Archaeological evidence shows that some prehistoric groups developed formal or informal procedures for dealing with relationship disputes. These procedures often involved group deliberation, ritual combat, or other structured ways of resolving conflict. However, these systems were often brutal and could result in death or exile for the guilty. The most disturbing evidence comes from prehistoric sites that show signs of what archaeologists call honor violence. These sites contain skeletal remains that show evidence of ritual killing, often involving multiple attackers and ceremonial element. This suggests that prehistoric humans sometimes treated infidelity as a crime against the entire group, requiring a collective response that could include torture, mutilation, and death. The seasonal patterns of prehistoric infidelity conflicts are particularly interesting. Archaeological evidence suggests that relationship disputes were more common during certain times of the year, particularly during periods of resource scarcity or group stress. When survival was most difficult, the social bonds that held groups together became more fragile, and infidelity was more likely to trigger violent responses. The tools and weapons used in prehistoric infidelity violence were often the same ones used for hunting and survival. Archaeological sites contain evidence of stone tools, bone weapons, and other implements that show signs of use in interpersonal violence. The fact that these tools were readily available meant that prehistoric humans could quickly escalate relationship disputes into deadly conflicts. The most shocking evidence comes from prehistoric sites that show signs of what archaeologists call partner. These sites contain skeletal remains that show evidence of intimate violence, often involving injuries that could only have been inflicted by someone who knew the victim well. The positioning of these remains and the nature of the injuries suggest that prehistoric humans were capable of killing their own partner when they felt sufficiently betrayed. The role of pregnancy and childbearing in prehistoric infidelity conflicts was particularly complex. Archaeological evidence suggests that pregnant women were sometimes targeted for violence when infidelity was suspected, as paternity uncertainty could trigger extreme responses from male partners. Some skeletal remains show evidence of violence against pregnant women, suggesting that prehistoric humans were willing to kill both mother and unborn child when they suspected infidelity. The group dynamics following infidelity conflict were often permanently altered. Archaeological evidence shows that prehistoric groups that experienced serious relationship conflicts often split apart, with different factions going their separate ways. These splits could be deadly, as smaller groups had lower survival rates and were more vulnerable to predation, starvation, and other threats. The most remarkable aspect of prehistoric infidelity responses is how they shaped the evolution of human social behavior. Archaeological evidence suggests that the intense conflicts generated by infidelity may have driven the development of more sophisticated social structures, communication systems, and conflict resolution mechanisms. The need to manage these deadly disputes may have been one of the driving forces behind the development of human civilization. The legacy of prehistoric infidelity responses can still be seen in modern human behavior. Many of our instinctive responses to relationship betrayal, jealousy, rage, the desire for revenge can be traced back to the survival strategies developed by our prehistoric ancestors. The difference is that modern humans have social systems and legal frameworks that limit our responses, while our ancestors had to rely on their own violent capabilities to address relationship conflict. The ritualistic aspects of prehistoric infidelity punishment were particularly elaborate. Archaeological evidence shows that some prehistoric groups developed complex ceremonies around relationship betrayal. These rituals often involved the entire group and could last for days. The unfaithful partner would be subjected to various forms of public humiliation, physical punishment, and social ostracism. Some cave paintings appear to depict these ceremonies, showing figures being attacked or humiliated by groups of other. The economic aspects of prehistoric infidelity responses were equally brutal. Archaeological evidence suggests that when infidelity occurred, it often led to the complete economic destruction of the guilty party. Their tools, weapons, and other possessions would be destroyed or confiscated. Their access to food and resources would be cut off. Their ability to participate in group hunting or gathering activities would be eliminated. This economic warfare could be more deadly than physical violence, as it could lead to slow starvation and death. The psychological torture techniques used by prehistoric humans in response to infidelity were surprisingly sophisticated. Archaeological evidence suggests that betrayed partners would often engage in systematic campaigns of psychological warfare against their unfaithful mates. This could include destroying their personal possessions, spreading false information about them, or isolating them from social support. Some skeletal remains show evidence of chronic stress and malnutrition that suggests individuals were subjected to prolonged psychological abuse. The alliance building that occurred around infidelity conflicts was complex and often deadly. Archaeological evidence shows that when infidelity occurred, it would often trigger the formation of competing alliances within the group. Family members, friends, and other supporters would choose sides, creating factions that could lead to group warfare. These alliances could persist for years, with the original infidelity conflict becoming the catalyst for ongoing violence and social disruption. The role of sexual competition in prehistoric violence was particularly intense. Archaeological evidence suggests that infidelity was often just one aspect of broader sexual competition between group members. When relationships were threatened, it would often trigger intense competition for sexual partners that could lead to violence, exile, or death. The need to maintain exclusive access to sexual partners was a matter of survival, as it affected everything from resource sharing to child-rearing cooperation. The impact on children from infidelity conflicts was devastating and long-lasting. Archaeological evidence shows that children who survived their parents' relationship conflicts often showed signs of chronic stress, malnutrition, and social isolation. These children were often abandoned by their groups or forced to survive on their own. The psychological trauma of witnessing extreme violence between their parents could affect their development and their ability to form relationships as adults. The development of prehistoric communication systems was partly driven by the need to manage infidelity conflicts. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric groups developed complex systems of signals, codes, and secret communications that were used to coordinate responses to relationship betrayal. These communication systems allowed groups to organize collective punishment, share information about unfaithful individuals, and coordinate alliance-building activity. The seasonal migration patterns of prehistoric groups were often affected by infidelity conflicts. Archaeological evidence shows that groups would sometimes alter their traditional migration routes or seasonal camps to avoid contact with individuals or groups involved in relationship disputes. These changes could have serious consequences for survival, as groups might be forced to use less favorable territory or miss important seasonal resources. The most shocking evidence comes from prehistoric sites that show signs of what archaeologists call relationship warfare. These sites contain evidence of systematic violence between individuals who were once intimate partners. The injuries found in these remains suggest that prehistoric humans were capable of extreme cruelty toward their former partners, using their intimate knowledge of each other to inflict maximum psychological and physical damage. The role of shamans and spiritual leaders in managing infidelity conflicts was crucial. Archaeological evidence suggests that prehistoric groups often turned to their spiritual leaders to help resolve relationship disputes. These leaders would sometimes perform rituals designed to cleanse the group of the spiritual contamination caused by infidelity. However, these rituals could be as violent as the conflicts themselves, involving physical punishment, exile, or even death for the guilty parties. The development of prehistoric law and justice systems was heavily influenced by the need to manage infidelity conflicts. Archaeological evidence shows that many prehistoric groups developed formal or informal codes of conduct regarding sexual behavior and relationship obligation. These codes often included severe punishments for infidelity, including violence, exile, or death. The enforcement of these codes was often brutal and could involve the entire group in collective punishment activities. If this shocking glimpse into the brutal reality of prehistoric relationships fascinates, make sure to subscribe. We're exploring the hidden truths about how our ancestors handled the most basic human conflict, revealing that survival in prehistoric times meant dealing with betrayal and violence in ways that modern humans can barely comprehend. Like this video, share it with someone who'd find it interesting, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.